Okay. So are you guys from the Atlanta area or?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you guys heard of the 1906 Atlanta Race Massacres? Okay.
No.
I've heard some about it.
Okay.
I've heard the name, I just don't know.
You don't know anything about it? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. I feel like I've heard of it like once or twice, but I don't know what it is.
Okay. So you have no other clue outside of that what it might be?
I don't know. That's exactly it. I don't know. But why is that? Why is that a massacre as grave as the one in 1906 Atlanta has become so lost in time? This is the Struggle for Justice, America's Forgotten Massacre with
Jador,
Aaron,
McKenna.
and Angie. The four of us have come together to discuss this very thing. Forgetting this event bolsters white supremacy. So stay tuned. It's time to remember. We are back with McKenna. Hey, McKenna.
Hey, Angie. Good to see you.
Glad to see you can join us today. So let's get into it. You studied Atlanta history for years, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So could you please give us a brief synopsis of the Atlanta Race Massacre? How did it start? What happened?
Yeah, of course. So, a bit of context. As we know, this event happened in 1906. It's an era where Black people are starting to thrive more economically and experience a little bit more freedom. However, this is also still the era of Jim Crow laws and segregation. The country is still deeply racist, and most of the white population is not comfortable with even the small steps that the Black community is making. So, because of this tension, it is actually quite common for unfounded inflammatory stories about Black people to make it into the papers. You might have heard of this concept, yellow journalism, before?
Yeah, like reporting misinformation to spread hate.
Exactly. So, one of these headlines states that some Black men had been committing assaults on white women, and this gained a lot of traction. A mob of white men started to amass in Five Points, Atlanta, and basically they started to attack any Black person that crossed their path. They destroyed Black businesses, raided their neighborhoods, cornered them in streetcars, and overall they killed a confirmed dozen Black men, women, and children. But we think this number is really closer to about 100 people because, it doesn't look great if the city of Atlanta admits this number is much higher than reported.
What a terrible tragedy. What was the police response? How did something like this end?
So this attack lasted Saturday and Sunday. There was some police intervention, particularly if a cop saw the mob attack someone right in front of them. There were reports that they would sometimes pull the assailants off. More so, however, Black people were actually unfortunately arrested for fighting back, and many police officers directly contributed to the mob.
Damn.
The police would actually go with the white mob on their rampages so that they could arrest Black people who defended themselves. The county sheriff was even quoted as saying that he wouldn't hesitate to kill every Black man within 1,000 miles of this place. Overall, about 250 Black men were arrested, while only 40 white men were.
I can't believe so many people have no idea this happened.
Yeah, and even if someone had heard of it, it's likely that they told this event was called the Atlanta Race Riots, instead of what it's formally been renamed to in 2022, the Atlanta Race Massacre. Riot versus massacre, people may have gotten the wrong idea.
It took 116 years to properly name it. Unbelievable. Okay, let's take a step back. This massacre happened like forever ago, so why do we care about it today? Society's nothing like it used to be, right? Well, considering it took that long for the name change, 116 years that is, that may not be as true as we think. I'm joined by Jador Janshaw, here to give us a little more insight on how much or how little things have changed.
Thank you, Angie. Yes, while times have changed, many of our ways have not. Let's take a look at some terminology to first contextualize our playing field, so to speak. There's been a myth circulating for a while now that white supremacy is null and void, that our government is somehow completely post-racial or neutral by now. However, part of the debate is taking the time to actually acknowledge the government's shortcomings.
Yeah.
Public administration has fabricated, maintained, and even supplemented systems of inequity. Said systems benefit white populations, but leave other populations systemically set secondary when it comes to representation and access in law.
So the government has stood by these systems and uphold these inequities. Why do you think change has been so slow going in these institutions? We all know white supremacy is objectively unfair.
I think it all ties back to the times of colonialism and a lingering idea about the white man's burden, where to justify pillaging their lands, inferiority was assumed of the natives. This sentiment persists, though in a more subtle light, so racial groups are still thrown into these groups of others who are inferior. Subtle segregational tactics like redlining...
Wait, redlining? As in?
As in the practice of denying people credit for housing loans based off where they live, even despite whether or not they may personally be qualified for the loans. Historically, redlining was used widely on black populated neighborhoods, an efficient way to maintain separational tactics without being directly racist.
Right. Yeah, I've heard of that, but I thought redlining was made illegal.
Yes, but only on a racial basis. Redlining based on monetary or even location-based biases is still perfectly legal, despite effectively having the same outcome.
All right, so on the track of keeping things separate, how does such a horrible piece of history gone almost completely unrecognized? There are no textbooks or honorary days or memorials to acknowledge its occurrence. It's weird, right?
The omission of culture and historical events has always been a way for the majority groups to oppress those they put beneath them. Specifically in this event, I think I recall reading an article about it by Derek Jones. Black accounts of this event were purposefully omitted from historical records so as to maintain the white-driven narrative. This way, the harm white people have inflicted upon black populations over the centuries can be minimized as much as possible. Expanded to a greater layer of detail, historical omission of black success, innovations, and recollections have served as a way to dehumanize black people. It allows for them to be seen and to see themselves as somehow inferior, simply because they don't know that so many great things have been achieved by their ancestors that were left out of focus. Historical events like the massacre are likely seen as better off forgotten, if only to uphold the standards white supremacy has set.
Well, not this time. It is time to remember. Thank you, Jador. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the sudden push for change after a century of inaction.
You know, it's like that shift from a riot to a massacre. It's about truth and narrative. The lack of truth is what led to the massacre, and that's exactly why we've got to switch things up.
So, the massacre happened because of a false story?
Absolutely. And now it's our responsibility to set things right, to weave a narrative that does justice to the victims.
And how do you think Atlanta should go about this?
It's not impossible. They just need to take a cue from what other cities have done. Unfortunately, race massacres have happened all over America. Oklahoma, Alabama, Louisiana, you name it. But instead of sweeping it under the rug, some of these places are trying to reveal the true nature of these events.
Okay, what's been going on in those states?
Well, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they established the John Hope Park in remembrance of the Tulsa race riot of 1921. In Montgomery, Alabama, they put up a national memorial for peace and justice to commemorate black victims of lynching in the United States. But my personal favorite comes from the small town of Colfax, Louisiana.
That is impressive. How did Colfax, Louisiana tackle it?
They went for something powerful. The monument there lists the names of 57 people identified in the mass killings. Plus, they incorporated artwork by Jasmine Lee Johnson, a black visual artist, reflecting the black experience during Reconstruction.
That's a solid way to acknowledge and remember the past. What impact does this all have?
It's about recognition, you know. By putting faces and stories to the numbers, they humanize the tragedy. It's not just a historical event, it becomes part of the shared narrative, urging us to learn from it.
Before we wrap up, consider this. How can you remember the lives lost? How can you personally make amends? Explore why this memory was neglected by those in power and decide what you, as an individual, can do now. This is the struggle for justice, Atlanta's forgotten massacre. Thanks for listening, and take these questions with you. Until next time.